and you are all welcome to Gyanalok Saturday Lecture series on social development issue and the role of development professionals. Today we have with us Professor Bipin Jojo. Professor Jojo has been teaching at Tata Institute of Social Sciences, deemed University Mumbai since 1997. Currently, Professor Jojo is Dean in the School of Social Work, TISS, Mumbai. He has completed MA in Social Work from Utkal University, Odisha in 1988, then MPhil in 1994 and PhD in 1999 from Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. He was awarded Research Fellowship from University Grant Commission, Government of India for his PhD. He was also awarded the prestigious Commonwealth Fellowship for academic staff by British government at School of Oriental and African Studies, London University, UK. He has been involved in teaching, research, and training in the area of tribal issue, social work with tribal perspective, migration, development, displacement, participatory development, management of voluntary organizations, NGOs, community-based organizations, management, and so on. He has written several academic articles and reports for government and non-government government. Many of his research articles are published in national and international reputed journals. Currently, he is working on research on well-being and indigenous knowledge system and impact assessment of CSR projects for different companies. He has been associated with several academic and development organizations nationally and internationally. To name a few, academic collaboration with many European universities under Erasmus project, Linnaeus Palme, DAD. He also conducted career guidance program for school and college students. He associated with several NGOs and people's movement in different parts of the country. He was also engaged for the policy changes or policy improvement of the government like Chhattisgarh and Maharashtra. Professor Jojo has a vast academic research and professional career. Out of his vast experience on tribal issues, today Professor Jojo will be delivered on social work with tribes. On behalf of Gyanalok and all participants of Saturday lecture series, once again I welcome Professor Jojo and request to address the audience. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Pradeep. Good evening, everyone. I thank Pradeep specially and congratulate to take this Saturday lecture series on behalf of Gyanalok. And I also thank Pradeep for giving this elaborate, generous introduction about me. But yes, one of my core areas of work has been on tribes and tribal social work. So when Pradeep reached me to speak on something on social work, so I said probably simple subject and easy subject for me would be to speak on tribes and tribe social work with tribes. We know that when we studied our MSW, or many of you must have studied BSW, as part of fields of social work, many university they teach as part of the fields of social work, and also sometimes as part of social welfare of SC, ST marginalized communities, or social policy and legislation, somewhere or other it is covered. But I think for the first time, which was part of a social work education, was way back 1958 when Tata Institute of Social Sciences had started a field action project in MP on tribal development. Okay, in way back 1958. So it is a long history that social work has been engaging with these groups, so-called tribes. It is not new. However, there have been different kinds of engagements, different ways of engagements, different ways of working with tribes around the country. But today, when I am discussing, I think I like to focus around two important aspects. One is the word tribe. How do we construct, or how does this community or the group called tribes are constructed? And then when we are working with tribes, most important is the context, that is the contextualization of these groups, and then the perspectives. Thereafter, we can talk about methods and skills and other things. But most important is, I see the contextualization of a particular reality, and that is today in the today's lecture, in the context of today's lecture, it is the tribes. Okay, I'm referring to the larger context, that is Indian context, and not referring to any particular state. I might take examples from different regions, different states, but I am trying to give a overall picture, overall context of the country. As we all know, we have about more than 10 crore, or about 8.6% of the population who belong to this category called tribe or scheduled tribe or Adivasi, who live largely in rural areas. About 90% of them live in rural areas. We can move on, Pradeep. And when we see that largely they are in the rural context, okay, they are living in the rural context. Now there are when we talk about tribes, we need to go back to the pre-independent period, how the state, that is the British state or the colonial India or the British India, dealt with or engaged with. And probably in that context, these legislations or these acts become very, very important. See, way back in 1873, there was a Bengal Eastern Frontier Act, which basically restricted the mobility of non-tribals into the tribal areas, specifically in the northeast region, which required inner line permit. And in some of the states, even today, like Arunachal Pradesh and all, still one needs to have the inner line permit to travel through the state. So way back 1873, this inner line permit concept came in, which regulated or restricted the mobility of non-tribals into the tribal areas, which means it restricted, it kept the tribal areas protected or isolated. Thereafter, the Schedule Area Act 1874, which identified certain geographical regions as schedule area, the earmarked, identified as schedule area. And thereafter, in Government of India Act 1919, the same schedule areas were further named as the backward area. And so the whole concept of backward region or backward area came in. And same thing continues in Government of India Act 1935, And so those backward area or backward tracts get divided into two regions or two areas, that is excluded and the partially excluded area. And so one can see that the British government had different legislations or acts to deal with the tribal regions, and which today with our Indian constitution, what we can find in 1935 act as excluded and partially excluded area. In the post-independent India, as part of the Indian constitution, we refer them as fifth and sixth schedule of the area, or the in our constitution. This is one aspect I think I like to share. In the same way, if we look at, I think it is very important for us to understand how census had looked at. So different census have categorized or enumerated them in different categories. So if you look at the census over the years, over the decades, different censuses have looked at differently and named them differently and categorized them in different names as part of the census enumeration. Next one, Pradeep. So they were identified as the group of other religion. 1871, 1881 Aboriginal, they were termed as Aboriginal. 1891, they were termed as forest tribes. 1901, they were categorized as animist. Thereafter, further they are in 11, 12, 21, if you look at animist, primitive, and if you look at further in 31, 30, 41, 51, in 51, we get the word scheduled tribe. Now, there have been in post-independent India, there were many commissions, like most important commission, probably one is to refer is Srikant, L.M. Srikant Commission and Kaka Kalikar and Lokur Commission, which defines who are the scheduled tribe. And five major characteristics have been used to define a community or group of a community or subgroup of a community as scheduled tribe. And those five criteria are the indication of primitive traits, distinctive culture, geographical isolation, shyness from the other community, and backwardness. Okay, so even today, these five criteria are referred or used to define any particular community as a scheduled tribe. Other than this name call or the category called scheduled tribe, we also have nomadic and denotified tribe. Another category is called nomadic and denotified tribe. Nomadic tribes, basically the tribes who were wandering or like gypsies. Denotified tribes, basically the groups who were regulated by the Criminal Tribes Act of 1871. And by this act, certain communities were identified or named as criminal tribe with this 1871 act. And so in immediately after independence in 50s, early 50s, this 1871 Criminal Tribe Act got denotified, and thereafter the same community which were known as criminal tribes were named as denotified tribes. And thereafter, this same act got replaced with Habitual Offenders Act 1959. And thereafter, we have different institutional mechanisms in the country, whether it is National Commission or the ministry or the departments, one can see with reference to this, whether it is scheduled tribe, whether it is denotified tribe, whether it is what we used to call primitive tribe and what we call today as particularly vulnerable tribal groups. Next one. So it is important for us to know this kind of history and so the discourse which determine the tribal policy of the country. Okay, so the discourse starts with, if we look at the history, I enumerated those in legislation. You see, it started with this colonial discourse, the imperialist perspective, which spearheaded the discourse of isolation. The tribes are in isolation, and that is why all these backward tracks, excluded, partially excluded areas, inner line permits, all these things were initiated during the colonial period, and so they were kept in isolation. In post-independent India, the nation-state perspective comes in. The nation-state perspective intended to see that how the people, irrespective of whoever it is within the nation-state of India, they all were to be brought in as part of the larger mainstream society. So they were intended, or it was attempted to see that how they could be assimilated and integrated with the larger dominant society or the Indian society. So getting absorbed into the larger society, and getting integrated with the larger Indian society. So this perspective starts with um, immediately after independence, largely in our tribal policy in 50s and 60s, like Nehru, Jawaharlal Nehru, Panchsheel also talks about this. Some Indian sociologists like G.S. Gore talks about this assimilation concept, and Nehru added on to integration. So if you look at, there were three important people. One is Warrior Elwin, who was a British missionary who came to India in 20s, in fact in 27, and gradually he became Indian rather, and he settled down. He became the advisor to Nehru on tribes, and he promoted, or he argued that tribes need to be kept in isolation. Rather, they need to be kept as they are, and so they should be protected. They should not be disturbed by others. And so that isolationist perspective comes from Elwin. When in the post-independent in India, G.S. Gore argues that no, they are one of our poor, backward Indians who needs to be assimilated. And in this debate between Elwin and Gore, Nehru comes in that no, they needs to be integrated with the larger so-called Indian nation state. In this two imperialistic and the nation state perspective, we see there is another perspective which is emerging for the tribal community themselves, with their resistance, with their assertion of autonomy or the assertion of self-determination. So largely we see that these three perspectives, three discourses or the narratives emerging from these three sources, or three important uh, locations, engages, tries to interact, and the whole of our tribal discourse today or tribal policy today revolves around this discourse. Next one, Pradeep. So when we continue working on our tribal policies, tribal development policy in India, largely who are the key actors? One is definitely state, the Indian nation state, and the market, the industries, what we call them at today CSR and so on, and civil society or the NGO or the voluntary organizations. Okay, sometime back, once upon a time, we used to call first sector, second sector, third sector. Okay, though things have moved on from there, and however, we see that these three actors are the prominent actors with regard to larger development discourse or larger development policies, and uh, also with regard to the tribes or the tribals empowerment, tribals development, or tribal welfare. Move on. Next one. So the tribal development policies, when we look at, uh, this started immediately after post-independent India, revolving around some of these kind of discourses, three discourses, and we look at these discourses are talking about these two approaches. One is evolutionary approach, That is, the people are backward, so they need to be developed. Okay. Next one is they are as they are, and so they need to be protected. And with their location, they should be allowed to develop as per their own wisdom and will and capacity, and accordingly the development policies should be brought in, which comes from largely Panchsheel from Nehru. So all our policies revolves around this discourse or this policy approach. Next one. Keep moving. Keep moving. And so all these policy programs revolve around this. Are many provisions we have in the constitution. We have specific dedicated constitutions. And so as I was telling you, these three concepts. So isolation to assimilation to integration, the whole tribal policy revolves around this. Um, and so when we look at our tribal development, the question comes: is it literacy? Is it to have pakka house? Is it to have toilets in the house? Whether it is to have drinking tap water, safe drinking water, or is it to have safe childbirth in the hospital, or having allopathic medicines and other kind of things, and so on and so forth. So this question comes in the what do we mean by tribal development or tribal welfare? I think this is the question coming in, and when we look at this question, we definitely we refer our approaches of welfare or approaches of social work practice. If we can move on, if we look at some of these approaches revolving around uh, some of these new realities. Okay, now communities are moving more and more moving away from their communitarian life, communitarian livelihood opportunities to getting into individualistic mode. They're shifting from the natural resource based livelihood to individual wage labor employment in offices or industries or different kind of government schemes like Manrega and so on and so forth. This is all. We also see the migration, large number of migrations towards the cities, and during the COVID time, we in fact um, discovered the kind of migration, not only the tribes but in general, the kind of the magnitude of the issues of migration in our country. Also, the whole debate around to be part of the larger Indian nation state, to go by the larger dominant discourse of development, and different kind of institutional mechanisms like the parliament or legislature or panchayat samiti, panchayat, etc., where there could be reservation to be able to be elected into these bodies, reservation into education, reservation in the jobs, and so on and so forth. So one can see some of these kind of changes, some of these kind of realities which the tribes are today. Next one. And so when we look at beginning or origin of voluntary action or the social work in the tribal areas, it goes back, or it goes back to the missionary work in 1830, when American missionaries started a school in Naga villages in Northeast. Then 1845, German missionaries started their work in Chotanagpur or present Jharkhand area with the schools and dispensaries and legal aid against the land alienation. Subsequently, with the Gandhian movement, Thakur Papa started Servants of India Society in 1921 to promote education and tribal welfare. And subsequently, the Bhil Seva Mandal also gets established. And today, what we see ashram school in different parts of the country, which comes with the Gandhian philosophy, which was further taken further by Thakur Papa's Servants of India Society. We also have looked at, we also find different groups which are based on Marxist ideology, who question the state, who starts questioning and take a bit of radical space or radical position, asserting the rights of the tribes and demanding the whole empowerment of the tribes or social justice issues. Many of the urban elites getting into the NGO sector or civil society organizations. Similarly, the retired bureaucrats and politicians starting their different organizations or NGOs. Today, one can see many civil society organizations in the name of self-help group or CBOs or grassroots level movements. And also now the tribal communities, from there one can see different organizations or different initiatives. So there have been many initiatives apart from the government, the state responsibility as part of the state's welfare responsibility, many voluntary initiatives started by different institutions, different bodies, different groups with different kind of ideologies and different kind of locations. Next one, please. Yeah, move on, Pradeep. Okay, so when we see, as this is we are well aware that we see kind of charity approach to the development, to the empowerment approach. However, there are certain limitations in the whole of these processes. Still we see the tribes are backward. Need some welfare services. Okay, so and still we have many of the schemes of the programs are curative rather than and as they are considered to be the backward, then many programs, many schemes are there to see how they can be civilized, how they can be modernized, how they can be reformed from their primitive behavior or primitive culture. Okay, and so many very often funding also driven approaches. Whenever there is fund, there is work. If there is no fund, there is no work. Then of course the governance issues. Now today, if you look at around the country, I think governance is one of the key issues in the tribal areas, where many of the assertions or struggles one can see, whether it is northeast, central India, or even in southern India, like state like Kerala. So in this kind of situation, what do we see? What is the hope? How do we see social work, practice, and education? Next one, Pradeep. Yeah, yeah. I think we all know about the symbiotic relationship between land, forest, water, the natural resources. So I do not want to get in too much on this. The close symbiotic relationship with the environment, with the nature. So that is one of the context, one of the realities where we see the tribes living, as 90% of them are living in the rural areas. Okay, so when we see there is a conflict of ideas, conflict of perspectives, conflict of narratives. Okay, the way we look at development, the way we look at empowerment, the way we construct welfare and development. I think that is where the questions are coming in. Next one. Move on, Pradeep. Yeah, move on. Move on. I think the kind of land and as we see the kind of industrialization and development displacement around the country, as most of the natural resources are found, coincidentally found in the tribal areas, and so large extractive industries or mineral-based industries one can find around the country wherever their tribes are. And so you will find in the map, next the map one can see all the colorful locations wherever there are tribes, wherever there are greenery, there are minerals. Okay, whole of Northeast, Orissa, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Gujarat, bit of Maharashtra, Kerala. Okay, one can find the overlapping of tribes, forest, minerals. Next one. So what are the challenges now in whole of this discourse? As I said, the concept or the category of tribe or scheduled tribe is constructed. Okay, it has been defined. And who has defined? Somebody else has defined. And so today, when it comes to international definition or international term like indigenous people, for the word, or in Indian context, what we can call as tribes or Adivasis, internationally the word indigenous people or aboriginals being used, largely indigenous people used. And one of the defining characteristic is how the colonizers have defined. Okay, so the different colonizers went around the world as part of their imperialists colonization process. As they travel around the world, how they have conceptualized it and how they have constructed these communities. Okay, and so the state initiates or has evolved, started different kind of initiatives to see that how they could be integrated or assimilated from their isolation. And we have enough examples, whether it is in Canada or Australia, similar kind of example in Canada and Australia, not only in India. And so how we can develop them. Idea of development comes in, idea of civilization comes in, because the tribes are so-called primitive, backward. Okay, so primitive, backward, uncivilized, so they need to be developed. So when we call it development, the one of the slides I had shown it, does it mean literacy? Does it mean living in a good house? Does it mean having running water? And so on and so forth. Okay, so what does this development mean, and whose development we are talking about, and at whose cost? So there are two things I'm putting these. So one is this, some of these indicators of development, whatever we are using as part of the development index, whether that determine the development of tribes, and so-called development projects in the tribal area in the name of industrial development or other kind of development, different kind of development projects we are having it. And so on whose development, on and whose cost. So if we look at the kind of development model we have, which have been largely appropriating the resources for the profit and denial of access to the resources for these communities. And in that context, we are talking about sustainable development. We have SDG 2030. Okay, so we have been talking about SDG, Sustainable Development Goal 2030. We are talking about, and as part of the SDG, I think large emphasis and a lot of emphasis is being given on this indigenous knowledge system. Okay, large emphasis is going on indigenous knowledge system to be able to sustain this earth. If we are not able to sustain sustainable use of the resources, I think we are getting into the disastrous situation. And so in this kind of situation, culture, development, loss of identity and existence, these are all questions which emerges. Okay, so when we have this kind of situation, what kind of social work practice we think of. Next one, Pradeep. That's where we talk about tribal social work or tribe-centered social work. Okay, we can stop for this screen sharing, Pradeep. I'll talk about what it refers to tribal social work. As I said, when we are social work, we are referring to we have inherited the whole methods, literature from West or Anglo-Saxon uh, um, uh, continuing that, and probably that is very relevant. I'm not denying that fact, but that is part of the larger uh, so-called Western education or the modernization project, that we have to spread development, we have to spread modernization, we have to spread education throughout the world. And if you remember 1936, when the American missionaries started Sir Dorabji's undergraduate school of social work in Mumbai, there were two more school of social work around the world were established. One in Kenya, Nairobi, another one in Latin America. Okay, so this was the larger dominant development project of the Western world to take the social work, because social work is another profession which was necessary along with the industrial development. Now, when you see the literature of Clifford Mansard, who was the first director of TISS, now he, during that time, many of our books were brought from America. Many of the teachers were sent to America to teach, come back and teach in India. Okay, so what happened that the whole larger project of West was established or perpetuated through our social work education. And thereafter, definitely, we have gone a long way with different kind of review. We had 2 rounds of UGC review. We have many kind of discussion debates. And then today we also have indigenization of social work, that whole debate around indigenization of social work. Now, I'm not getting into too much of detail on that, but however, indigenization of social work, when it comes, what does this indigenization of social work mean? Okay, whether it is just bringing the social work methods and practices and making relevant in our context, or we are trying, whether we are trying to contextualize our reality and see that what kind of methods and practices are relevant. Working with individuals or so-called casework, Mary Richmond, what we started, definitely in that context, that was very, very relevant, because after the World War II, World War and the recession, I think that was very, very much necessary to have individual work and therapeutic work and psychosocial work. And so Mary Richmond came up with working with individuals or casework. That was very, very relevant to that context. Now, in the same way, when we are talking or referring to our Indian situation, and with specifically in today's lectures context, when we refer it to tribal context, now we have to contextualize where the tribes are and how the tribes are understood or conceptualized, and based on that, one has to see that whether some of these methods and skills, what we are talking, are relevant. Many times, see the whole discourse of tribes, the discourse of tribes from the primitivism to primitivism or uncivilized to or backwardness to development. The development project tries to bring in they are poor, backward, uncivilized, so they need to be backward. So they are brought into the education like ashram school, as it was done in Canada, as it was done in Australia, where mass genocide, it is kind of cultural genocide, where thousands and thousands indigenous people, the First Nation children, were kept in the residence schools and completely they were denied or alienated from their parents, their culture, their language, and their whole communities. And if you look at some of their stories online, I mean, it is devastating. The same thing we can see today in ashram school. It had started. In Kerala, for example, when we see the tribal children going to ashram school or residential school, they do not like to go back to their parents because of that notion of development, the notion of primitivism, the backwardness brings in that inferiorization. So the point I'm trying to see the how we construct and how we contextualize a reality, and then we see that what methods will be appropriate there. And so very often, when we come to tribe social work, the kind of history, the kind of cultural context they are in, the history, the are bonded, or they are with the bonds, or they are in the shackles, or the um, um, what to say, the kind of uh, impositions they have, or yeah, imposition of the ideas they have, which they cannot think of their own cultural based education or cultural based empowerment or development, and so instead of development, rather that inferiorization, idea of inferiorization shifts into them, and the reference points always becomes that no, I have to be like this, then only I will be called developed. So there is a large debate around questioning this so-called Western dominant discourse and looking at everything universal. The solution, every particular situation has to be part of the larger particular universal framework. So there is a counter question into this universalization of every particular. So every particular cannot be universalized because every reality is unique. Very complex reality. The diversity, cultural diversity, complexity we live with. Probably this universalization of the whole discourse or the framework might be problematic, and so that's where very often I think the latest literature in social work is coming up with not only indigenization of social work, not only anti-oppressive social work, not only critical social work, not only structural social work. Of course, there is a huge literature around anti-oppressive social work, anti-race social work, critical social work, which emerged from feminist social work. But now I think the literature is going much beyond that, and indigenous social work is coming in internationally. And indigenous, along with this, some of the latest literature, if you look at, they are also referring to culturally sensitive practice as well as culturally relevant practice. So one has to see, if we want to make it culturally relevant, and one has to see the whatever practice and methods we think of that should be relevant to that context. When we say culturally sensitive, one might be sensitive to certain reality, certain situation, and work or evolve a practice, but probably the culturally sensitive or culturally relevant practice should be more appropriate looking at the context. And so there is also literature and the argument around the world, decolonial social work. Okay, the social work discourse has been around the dominant discourse of development, modernization, which has tried to frame a particular notion or imagination of development. And so one has to aspire that particular frame or that particular imagination one need to have. Then only one will be said, or one will feel that yes, he or she is developed or I am developed. So there is a question to that. No, there cannot be a single notion of development, but there could be multiple notions, or there should be notion of developments. So we cannot have a single formula, single homogenized formula, but there has to be multiplicity of formulas, multiplicity of methods, multiplicity of skills. And so there are internationally large debate around decolonial social work. Within this decolonial social work, one can find structural social work or critical social work, or anti-oppressive social work or indigenous social work. In the similar line, in India, one can find indigenous social works parallel to indigenous social work in the international level, uh, tribal social work or tribal center social work. So tribal center social work tries to see that how one can look at this discourse critically, contextualize the reality, and try to evolve its practice and methods. Okay, so it allows to critically look at a reality and not accept a given reality or given field and given methods. Rather, it questions, okay, it challenges uh, the dominant discourse or dominant method. It is it questions the superiority of a dominant, okay, and it questions the perspectives coming from colonial perspective, and it tries to see that there are multiple perspectives, there are multiple lenses, and some of these realities are very much structural. As is it goes back to the history, culture, ethnicity, politics. It is sometimes that the whole practice is very much political and so very much structural. It is embedded with the structures and systems. So unless we are able to address the social work is able to address the systems and structures which has kept these communities as backward, uncivilized, okay, primitive, or the notion which determines or defines them to be as primitive or backward or uncivilized, I think it will not be possible to have the dignified individual or equal society like any other citizens or human being. So there is whole idea of questioning, whole idea of reconstructing, whole idea of uh, 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 contextualizing from their own reality and build from their worldview or from their perspective and evolve the practice, skills, and methods. So I'll stop here, and I'm sure I have challenged a bit, and I am looking forward to have very interesting questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Indeed, it is a great session for all of us. And I know in the last lecture, Professor Sanjay Bhatt told social work is meant for empowering the marginalized, backward, oppressed, and depressed community of the society. And no doubt, working with tribes is one of the major area of social work intervention. And you, out of your vast knowledge, experience, and research knowledge, you enlightened us the situation of a tribe, evolution of tribes, and evolution of social work is a parallel how it is going on, and at present where are we. Thank you so much once again, and I welcome the participants, those who want to ask any question or any doubt you have, you can ask to sir. Sir is there with us to clarify all these things. Yes, those who want to ask question, please raise your hand. After that, no. Josna Das, want to ask any question? Please unmute. Please unmute yourself. Please unmute. Josna Das, please unmute, then ask your question. One question from asked by Kuldeep Ram: how to engage tribal community for government schemes? Probably he want to know the tribal participation in government program, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I would like to reiterate again that tribes are not homogeneous groups. The tribes, starting with Kerala, Wayanad, Attapadi district, tribes in Attapadi district, Wayanad district, the status of tribe in Kerala is not the same like the tribes in Orissa or Jharkhand or the tribes in Northeast. So we cannot have a single approach, single homogenized solution to the development. And so single schemes and programs probably will not be relevant. So as we have multiple realities, now we have to design multiple government programs. And so when we are designing government programs, large evaluation studies have found and seen that the result of different programs have been far lesser than expected. Why? One of the reasons is poor implementation, they say, but I would say it is poor conceptualization. Okay, whether it is has been conceptualized to the context, relevant, whether it is relevant, and how we can make it relevant. We can make it relevant only when we make the people participate in this process. Okay, and so they should be able to participate what is good and bad for them, or what will be relevant for them, and be part of the governance systems. So be able to participate in conceptualizing or designing or articulating their participate in the whole governance systems or in the government programs. So I hope, Kuldeep, I have answered your question.
So
Yeah, thank you so much. You are very nicely describe this type of question. So thank you so much, sir. And I hope I am use this particular things of in a community where I am working. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay. Thank
Kuldeep,
you.
can you introduce yourself, please?
Namaste, Sabiko. My name is Kuldeep Ram. I am from Kaimur, Bhabua, Bihar. Currently, I am working with the Reliance Foundation, Sitamarhi, Bihar. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, good.
Any other doubt or question? Anybody? Those who want to ask question, please unmute and introduce yourself. After that, you can ask your question. No question?
And yeah, if just I probably will like to just add it that we have started at Tata Institute of Social Sciences. We have started tribal social work, Dalit and tribal social work, in fact, where we discuss about some of these aspects, which briefly I have touched upon, and see that how social work has to be relevant to the questions of the tribes.
Sir, actually, for one more question I have.
Yes.
So in the name of development, where we are saying about tribal development, and we all know, and you are, thankfully you are also from Odisha. Odisha is having no 13 PVTGs and 62 tribal communities. I have visited some of the places, some of the communities. And I found in the name of a development, we are no damaging all the traditional culture, social systems, which is really no precious for all of us. And India, as a no culturally rich country, is known for that only. So in that situation, no doubt, development is required. But how to know balance, or how to manage the things which is giving us identity in terms of culture or society. So how to balance between cultural richness and development of tribes.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
So being a social worker, actually, I'm a little bit sensitive for that. So that is why I'm asking this question. I don't know actually whether I'm right or wrong to ask this question, but this is in my mind.
Yeah. No, see, it evolves from the whole idea of development. How do we construct the idea of development? Okay, so we think that there are certain assumptions on our behalf, or the policy planners, or the decision makers, that what should be, what they should be like, what they should have.
Yes.
Okay, whether they like it or not, whether they will have it or they will use it or not, we do not know. And so without bringing them into the whole fold of dialogue or discussion, now of late that process has begun. Very late recently that process has begun now, and thanks to, I think, the civil society organizations, that now there is a larger debate around the people who are, for whom the programs and schemes should be part of the dialogue and the decision making process. So they should be able to decide or define what is good for them, not somebody else decides for them. And so when they decide for them, they let them decide, because their change is obvious. Change is going to be there. So we cannot say that the people should be wearing the same cloth or the same way of cloth, and today and they should not change. No, they also have aspiration. They also like to change. And so when they wear suit and shoe, one cannot say that no. See, they are well developed, or they are not no more tribes. Now, what happens that there is going to be change, but let them change at their own wish and at their own pace. And probably when they develop or that they change at their own imagination or aspirations and at their own pace, probably there will be less destruction. Okay, so that change is going to happen, but gradually it will happen, and if it happens with their own participation and at their own pace, probably it will be less destructive.
Thank you, sir. Any other question?
There is this chat
Hello,
message
sir.
that
Am I
no
audible,
longer
sir?
has access.
Yes, you are audible. Please introduce yourself.
Good evening, everyone. This is Ashwarya, a PhD research scholar from Mahatma Gandhi Central University, Bihar. It's a pleasure to see you again, sir. Professor Bipin Jojo, sir. Last time I meet
Yes, we
you
met in
at.
Lucknow.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's an honor to have you here, sir. Uh,
Good.
I have a request. You told about some initiative that you are that TIS has started a forum to discuss about the issues of tribal development. I would like to be part of that.
Okay.
Please let
Yeah,
me
we
know
we do we
how
do
can.
have we organize very often. We organize very informally. We do not organize large national conference or workshop kind of thing. We organize,
Okay.
and nowadays it is online most of the time. So yeah, we will let you know. next time.
Thank you so much, sir. I will be happy to be there.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Aishwarya. Thank you for your interest. Actually, sir, why I asked this question, because few months back I visited Bandaghati, Malkanagiri, and I found around 23 different types of alcohol are being prepared by the people, Banda people, and they know what then no actually whatever wastage they are having, they simply make it liquor or alcohol by using that wastage. So gradually among the youths, that practice and that art of preparing alcohol is gradually decreasing. So they rather they prefer foreign liquor instead of taking their traditional practices further.
Yeah.
So I had that concern, so I asked this question. Any other question anybody is having? Please ask.
2 weeks back, Pradeep, I went to Niyamgiri.
Okay.
Okay. As you referred about drink, so in one of the villages we visited, a couple of youth were selling solporasa.
Sab, yes.
Okay, solop. And they were coming from Muniguda.
Okay.
In the motorcycle, they were carrying 2 jerkins of solporasa and going to the remote villages in the Niyamgiri area. Now there are very few sulfur trees in the mountain, very few, and so the people who were used to have sulfur traditionally, they cannot have, and so the people from Muniguda area in the bike, they're carrying sulfur and going into the different remote villages and selling it. Okay, so it used to be part of the regular drink, part of their day-to-day daily drink. Now this has become part of the market. Okay, and that too coming from outside. Had it been local from the same village, somebody is selling to the villagers, one can say that at least somebody is making money from the village. And usually when you go to the village, when they go, you have sulfur also, it is not sold. They whoever reaches there, everybody has,
Yes.
they share freely, isn't it? So whole idea of market is good, but when the market is inclusive, to be able to include people, everyone, then probably fine. But if the market system is marginalizing or denying certain communities or certain groups, that's where I think market is just appropriating the profit, but trying to marginalize others.
Yes.
That is a bit of problematic.
Sir, I have a question that is somewhere similar to Pradeep, sir. Can I ask?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Aishwarya.
The, the current notion of development is not appropriate, as you say. Then what will be the appropriate notion of development, according to you, sir? I want to know your opinion.
No, I don't have answer to that question, Surya. But I think people themselves can define what is the development for them. They can define what is development for them, not you and me.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah.
Any other question? Okay, I think probably no more question. Once again, sir, on behalf of all the participants and Gyanalok, I sincerely thank you for uh, accepting our request and delivering such a nice and vibrant topic. Uh, uh, we all the participant, I found more than 100, reached to 103 or 4, I think, participated in today uh, uh, webinar, and This is from different parts of the country, not only necessarily from Odisha. Actually, we
Yeah.
found registration from around 15 states of India. And no doubt it is helpful being a part of social work fraternity, being a part of being a human being, to have some inclination, some love, affection for the humanity. Uh, we as a team organize such type of program. I request on behalf of Gyanalok, I request all the participants present over here, please circulate this about this lecture series among other friends, relatives, and junior or senior, whoever they are, because this program is uh, designed for 5 months. In every Saturday at 6:30 p.m. this program will be conducted, and people like Bipin sir and other renowned speakers will deliver on different social issues and how to address that issue being a social worker or development professional. That is most important. Once again, thank you all the participants, and thank you so much, sir, for your valuable uh, lecture. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for patience listening, and thank you, Pradeep and Gyanalok team for organizing this lecture series. Very good.
Asutosh sir is a part of this no idea. When we actually frame this idea, he was there to upgrade time to time different things and connect the people. As you know, I did not have that much of connect with different people, and he was like a backbone behind this idea and the program. He supported a lot um, behind
Good, good.
the scene. So I must thank him for his cooperation and support to organize such a nice program, and we are
Yeah, I
getting
think he
responses.
was there. I think he has gone, I believe.
No, thanks, Bipin.
Oh, you are there.
Yeah, I'm there. Thanks, thanks for accepting the our request and finding out time because you are a busy person
No, no,
and
it is
most
any
of the
initiative.
people, most of the
Sir,
people with
we
whom
have
we are
also
connecting.
agenda like to catch all the busy person first. That has been planned last Saturday. So first we will request all the busy people to deliver. After that, we'll request other people who are available at least.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I'll be happy to come back much later stage after once you complete your circle on some other topic as well. Anytime.
No, sir. Actually, we are planning for to invite some international delegates, and soon after completion of this series, we'll plan for that. And
Mhm.
definitely we'll take your support and cooperation for this, because we don't have that much of connection with international people. And since you have spent most of your time in Europe and all the university, you know the people over there, so that will be of a great help for us to connect the people, and they can at least help us to understand modern social work practice.
Mhm. Yeah, sure, sure.
Thank you
Good.
once again, all the participants. Now, those who want to quit, they can quit or leave the program. And again, I request to be associated in the next coming Saturday at 6:30 p.m.
Those who have not registered, please register so
Yes, yes.
that we have a record. We have a record of all the emails and names and your official address. That will be helpful to us in